The end of affordable life in America has begun, and you're living through the collapse right now. Millions of Americans are waking up every morning wondering why life feels harder, heavier, and more hopeless than it did just a few years ago. And here's the truth: nobody in power wants to say out loud, "You're not imagining it." Prices didn't just go up. The entire cost of survival has exploded. Since 2020, groceries are up 28 to 45%. Rent is up 32%. Utilities are up 22%. Car insurance is up 46%. And home ownership is now the least affordable it has been in 39 years. And yet the average American wage? It hasn't kept up at all. Real incomes have fallen for 3 straight years. But here's the part that should scare you. 62% of Americans now live paycheck to paycheck, including nearly half of people earning 6 figures. 100 million Americans are in medical debt, and financial anxiety has quietly become the #1 mental health issue in the country. This isn't inflation anymore. This is a full-blown affordability meltdown, and every single indicator shows it's not slowing down. It's accelerating. So if you've been feeling overwhelmed, stuck, or like no matter how hard you work, the finish line keeps moving farther away, you need to hear this. It's not your fault. The system itself is cracking, and today I'm breaking down exactly how we got here, what's coming next, and why millions of Americans are already experiencing the early stages of a financial collapse that experts said would never happen here. Let's get into it. What's really happening right now, and I think you probably feel this in your chest every morning, is that everyday Americans are hitting a psychological breaking point that economists almost never acknowledge. People aren't just struggling financially, they're losing the spark that makes them human. And I want to talk about this carefully, because when you zoom out and track the data, it's absolutely staggering. We're living in a country where 61% of Americans say they are living paycheck to paycheck, and that number doesn't just include low-income workers anymore. It now includes 45% of people earning over $100,000 a year, which should tell you everything you need to know about how the cost of living has run completely off the rails. And when people feel trapped economically, they start shutting down emotionally too. That's why you're seeing millions of videos online of people admitting they feel purposeless, exhausted, numb, or like nothing matters anymore. The American Psychological Association released a report showing that burnout levels in 2024 hit the highest point ever recorded, with young adults reporting hopelessness at rates unseen since the Great Depression, and that hopelessness is spreading like a cultural virus. People don't believe the system rewards work anymore. They don't believe opportunity exists anymore. And statistically, they're not wrong. Real wages have fallen 3.2% since 2021. Groceries are up 25 to 40% depending on the region. Rent has climbed an average of 32% nationwide, and homeownership is now the least affordable it has been in 39 years, with the median home requiring 52% of the median household income just to service the mortgage. So when people say they feel stuck, it's because the math is proving they are stuck. It's not laziness. It's not lack of ambition. It's a system that no longer rewards effort, only pre-existing wealth. And when a society reaches the point where hard work stops translating into upward mobility, that's historically when you see the fabric of life begin to shred economically, socially, spiritually. That's why so many people feel disconnected from everything around them. They're not broken. The system is. And the system is showing signs of a deeper collapse, the end of affordable life itself in the United States. Another pattern emerging across the country, and this is one of the clearest indicators that the American affordability crisis has reached a historic breaking point, is that millions of people who followed every rule, checked every box, got the degree, worked the job, built the resume, and did everything society told them to do are now realizing that none of it is enough. And this isn't just anecdotal anymore, it's measurable. The Federal Reserve released a survey showing that 36% of Americans with a bachelor's degree or higher are working jobs that do not require a degree, and 47% of recent graduates are either unemployed or underemployed, the highest rate since 1992. Corporate job postings that used to receive 50 to 100 applicants now routinely get 1,000 to 3,000, while hiring managers admit that many positions are simply never filled because companies don't want to pay a living wage. And that wage, the mythical living wage, is drifting further out of reach. In 2024, MIT's living wage calculator found that a single adult with no children needs $22.44 per hour just to survive, not thrive, survive. Yet 52 million workers earn less than that. And this is where the psychological fracture begins. People with master's degrees are being rejected from jobs at Home Depot because they're overqualified. Workers with a decade of specialized experience can't get a single callback. People who used to feel unstoppable now feel like NPCs in someone else's economic game, invisible, replaceable, unneeded. And in that environment, something catastrophic happens to the middle class. It stops existing. Because the middle class isn't just a level of income, it's an identity, built on the belief that hard work produces stability, that you can afford a home, that you can build a family, that effort equals reward. Once that belief dies, you don't just lose the middle class, you lose the culture that depends on it. Weddings drop, birth rates drop, home buying drops, community involvement drops. Even church attendance declines. A society where people no longer believe in tomorrow becomes a society that can't sustain itself today. And right now, America is slipping, quietly, steadily, into that psychological recession. A collapse that begins inside people long before it shows up on any official government chart. America is turning into a nation of strangers. Something you might have noticed, and a lot of people are finally admitting this out loud, is that the sense of community that once held American life together is collapsing faster than anyone expected. And this collapse isn't just emotional or cultural. It's wired directly into the economics of affordability. When housing becomes unaffordable, when families can't put down roots, when people move every 12 to 24 months just to chase cheaper rent or escape rising utilities, what you lose is stability. And stability is the foundation of community. Today, Americans move more frequently than at any point since 2008, primarily due to rent spikes averaging 14% per year in major metros and over 30% in some Sun Belt cities. And when you can't stay in one place, you can't build relationships, you can't build trust, you can't build belonging. The Surgeon General released a report in 2024 showing that loneliness is now as deadly as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. And this epidemic is financially driven because people who work 2 to 3 jobs don't have time for friends. And people who can't afford childcare can't participate in community life. And people who barely survive the work week don't have the emotional bandwidth to join anything outside survival mode. Add to this the trend that millennials are now the first generation in American history projected to have fewer friends than their parents. And Gen Z reports social disconnection at rates 40% higher than millennials did at the same age. This didn't happen because people suddenly forgot how to socialize. It happened because the economy pulled the rug out from under them. When your rent takes half your paycheck, when groceries cost 25 to 40% more than they did just 3 years ago, when gas and utilities rise every quarter, when health insurance is unaffordable for nearly 30 million Americans, every moment of your life is consumed by financial triage. And a person who is constantly in economic crisis simply doesn't have the capacity to build community. That's why when you walk into a grocery store, into an airport, into a workplace, people look hollow, drained, dissociated, like they're physically present but psychologically checked out. A community can't survive when everyone is exhausted. A society can't function when everyone is isolated. And right now, America is quietly becoming a country of strangers, a population of disconnected individuals trying to survive inside a system that no longer supports the basic human need for belonging. Home ownership, family life, and aging with dignity are becoming mathematical impossibilities. Another force accelerating the end of affordable life in America, and this is one of the most chilling trends when you dig into the data, is the collapse of the traditional path to stability. For nearly a century, the American dream rested on 3 pillars: owning a home, raising a family, and retiring with enough to live out your later years in dignity. But each one of these pillars is now structurally failing in real time. Home ownership, for example, has become so out of reach that a median-priced home now requires an annual income of $114,000, while the actual median household income sits at $74,580. That gap alone explains why first-time homebuyers now represent the smallest share of the market in 41 years. And when homes become unaffordable, people delay marriage, delay children, delay everything that gives life long-term meaning and stability. U.S. birth rates just hit a record low, and adults aged 18 to 34 now report that they are unlikely to ever afford children at rates 3 times higher than a decade ago. But the collapse doesn't stop there. Retirement, once seen as the reward for decades of labor, is evaporating. The National Institute on Retirement Security reports that 57% of Americans have less than $1,000 saved for retirement, and 1 in 4 baby boomers has no retirement savings at all. At the same time, the cost of retirement has surged by 18% since 2020, with senior housing, medical care, and long-term support skyrocketing beyond what fixed incomes can support. This means millions of Americans are staring down the reality of working until they physically cannot, not because they want to, but because they'll be homeless if they stop. And genealogists are now warning that multi-generational households, once seen as cultural choices, are becoming economic necessities as parents, children, and grandparents pool shrinking resources under one roof just to keep a roof over their heads. When a society loses the ability to buy a home, build a family, or retire, that society is entering the early stages of socioeconomic collapse, whether officials admit it or not. And millions of Americans feel this intuitively. They know stability isn't just hard, it's becoming mathematically impossible. And when stability dies, the American dream dies with it. Labor is getting cheaper, while life gets more expensive. Something that's becoming painfully clear, and you've probably felt this yourself in your workplace, in your job search, or even in side hustles that once paid decently, is that the bargaining power of the average American worker has collapsed. Completely. And when you track the numbers over the last decade, you can literally watch the floor falling out beneath people. Right now, worker productivity in the U.S. is at an all-time high, yet wage growth has stagnated to the point where real wages are actually down 3 to 5% since 2021, depending on the sector. Meanwhile, companies are reporting record profits, with 2023 marking the second highest corporate profit margins in 75 years. So what happens when corporations earn more, but workers earn less? Workers lose leverage. And when workers lose leverage, affordability dies, because the cost of everything else, housing, insurance, transportation, food, is rising faster than wages can keep up. This is why millions of people with stable jobs still feel like they're suffocating financially. The labor market is no longer shaped by supply and demand. It's shaped by desperation. For example, over 9.3 million Americans are working multiple jobs just to cover basic expenses, the highest number on record since the Bureau of Labor Statistics began tracking it. Meanwhile, AI automation is entering industries faster than regulators can understand it, with the IMF warning that 40% of global jobs will be directly impacted by AI, and up to 60% in advanced economies like the U.S. That means fewer entry points, fewer mid-tier jobs, and far more competition for whatever positions remain. Employers know this. That's why you're seeing job postings where companies demand 5+ years of experience for entry-level positions or require master's degrees for jobs that used to take a 2-year college credential. And yet the pay hasn't increased to match the new expectations. This mismatch is catastrophic. It means the ladder to upward mobility is being pulled up while millions of Americans are still climbing. And when millions of people apply for the same job, the employer doesn't have to pay well. They don't have to offer benefits. They don't have to counteroffer. They know workers have nowhere else to go. This is why people feel devalued, invisible, replaceable, because they are. The economy has shifted from rewarding skill to rewarding scarcity, and workers are on the wrong side of that shift. The result? A country where employment is no longer a path to stability, but a constant fight for survival, inside a collapsing affordability ecosystem. There's another trend quietly reshaping the American landscape, and it's one of the most alarming signs that we've crossed into a new era where affordability no longer exists as a national value. And that's the financialization of everything. I'm talking about the transformation of basic human necessities housing, food production, healthcare, even water rights into speculative assets traded by hedge funds, private equity firms, and multinational corporations. When Wall Street enters a market, prices rise. It's not a theory, it's a pattern. For example, investment firms like BlackRock, Invitation Homes, and Pretium Partners have spent the last decade buying up hundreds of thousands of single-family homes, often outbidding families by paying above asking price in cash. This raised home prices by an estimated 12 to 20% in targeted markets, according to a 2023 Federal Reserve analysis. And the goal of these firms is not community stability, it's return on investment. That's why rents in corporate-owned neighborhoods increased twice as fast as rents in traditionally owned areas. But it doesn't stop at housing. Private equity now owns 24% of all ER departments, 30% of veterinary clinics, 17% of nursing homes, and growing shares of food distribution networks. Every time private equity enters an industry, costs rise and service quality declines because the business model relies on extraction, not service. Researchers found that private equity-owned nursing homes had 10% higher mortality rates due to understaffing and cost-cutting. Meanwhile, food inflation has been heavily influenced by commodity speculation, with Wall Street investors pouring billions into futures markets, pushing grocery prices up 25 to 40% since 2020. Even water rights are being securitized, with California's water futures market trading like an energy or tech stock. And what happens when essentials become investment vehicles? Ordinary people get priced out of their own lives. You're no longer competing with another family for a home, you're competing with a multinational asset manager backed by billions in leverage. You're no longer paying market price for food, you're paying the inflation caused by speculative profit-taking. This financialization has turned survival into a pay-to-play system where the richest actors set the price of living itself. And when the essentials of life become unaffordable to the majority, a society enters the early stages of systemic failure. Not because people failed, but because the system stopped viewing people as citizens and started viewing them as revenue streams. Staying alive has become a luxury purchase in America. What almost no politician wants to admit, but every American with a beating heart already knows, is that the healthcare system in this country has fully transformed into a debt trap, a financial minefield where even a single medical event can destabilize an entire family for decades. And this isn't fear-mongering. This is math. Right now, over 100 million Americans carry medical debt, according to a 2024 KFF Health News investigation, and nearly 1 in 5 Americans with insurance still cannot afford basic care. Let that sink in. Having insurance doesn't protect you anymore. The average deductible for employer-provided plans has risen 280% since 2006, far outpacing wage growth. Meanwhile, hospital systems, many of them now owned or managed by private equity firms, are charging 10 to 20 times the cost of care to compensate for their debt financing structures. It's why an ER visit that used to cost $300 now routinely hits $2,000 to $4,000, even if they do nothing besides check your vitals and hand you discharge papers. The U.S. is the only developed country where medical bankruptcy is the #1 cause of personal bankruptcy, accounting for 66% of filings. And what scares economists the most is that healthcare inflation is now rising faster than housing, food, and transportation. Prescription drug costs have increased 37% since 2020. Insulin prices only dropped after public outrage forced politicians to act. And Americans are paying 4 to 10 times more for the same medications available in Canada or Europe. Even basic procedures, childbirth, MRIs, dental work now cost more than what many families earn in a month. It's no wonder that 45% of adults say they delay medical care because they can't afford it, including cancer screenings, mental health treatment, and emergency visits. And when people delay care, they get sicker. When they get sicker, they miss work. When they miss work, they lose income. When they lose income, they lose housing. And suddenly, you're looking at a country where the simple act of staying alive is economically destabilizing millions of households. America is now the richest country in the world, where people regularly start GoFundMe campaigns to pay for surgeries. That alone tells you the system is not just broken, it is predatory by design. And when a nation's health depends on its wealth, affordability hasn't just ended. Human dignity has too. Another pillar collapsing beneath American life. And this is one of the clearest indicators that the affordability crisis is not temporary, but structural, is the runaway cost of food and basic essentials. Grocery inflation didn't just rise, it exploded. Since 2020, prices for everyday staples like eggs, bread, chicken, and produce have increased anywhere from 28% to over 45%, depending on the region. And while inflation has cooled on paper, it hasn't actually reversed, meaning the new, higher prices are now the permanent baseline. Consumers aren't imagining it. 80% of food manufacturers admitted to shrinking portions, shrinkflation, while charging the same or more, and 2/3 of major companies openly told shareholders that elevated prices are here to stay. And this is where the picture gets darker. Global fertilizer shortages, extreme weather volatility, and supply chain disruptions have pushed U.S. farmland prices to historic highs, up 34% nationwide since 2021, with states like Iowa and Kansas reporting increases closer to 50%. Meanwhile, just 4 corporations now control 85% of the U.S. beef market. 4 companies control 90% of grain, and the nation's egg supply is dominated by a handful of conglomerates that set prices with near monopolistic power. When the food system becomes this concentrated, consumers lose all leverage. That's why grocery stores are now locking up everyday items like cheese, deodorant, and baby formula, not because theft is skyrocketing, but because the margins have become so razor thin and the retail model so strained that everything must be secured like precious metals. Even fast food, once the refuge of the working class, is becoming unaffordable, with the average meal now costing $12 to $15, up nearly 60% in 4 years. And families are feeling the squeeze. Household food insecurity jumped to 17% in 2024, the highest rate since the Great Recession. When people can't afford groceries, they rely more on processed foods, leading to higher healthcare costs, which feeds directly back into the medical debt crisis. It becomes a feedback loop of poverty. The essentials of survival food, hygiene, basic household products are now behaving like luxury goods, subject to global market speculation, monopoly pricing, and supply chain fragility. And when the basics become unaffordable, a society doesn't just decline. It destabilizes. What almost no one connects, but every expert quietly acknowledges, is that America isn't just facing rising prices. It's facing the slow, grinding failure of the physical systems that make modern life possible. And once infrastructure starts collapsing, affordability isn't just impacted, it becomes mathematically impossible. Right now, 43% of U.S. public roadways are rated as poor or mediocre. And the American Society of Civil Engineers estimates that 45,000 bridges are in such deteriorated condition that they require immediate repair or replacement. Water systems? Even worse. More than 6 million lead pipes still deliver drinking water to American homes, disproportionately affecting lower-income families, while an estimated 2,000 U.S. water systems violate federal safety standards every year. And the cost of repairing all of this? The ASCE projects a funding gap of $2.6 trillion by 2039, meaning the decay will accelerate long before it improves. When infrastructure collapses, everything around it becomes more expensive. Delivery costs rise because trucks can't efficiently move goods across failing highways. Insurance premiums skyrocket because America now faces 10 times more billion-dollar natural disasters per year than it did in the 1980s. Power outages are up 151% since 2015, with the energy grid so fragile that a single storm can shut down entire regions. forcing families to throw away hundreds of dollars of spoiled food, while utility companies request rate hikes to upgrade the very infrastructure they allowed to decay. And this is where affordability dies. When water systems fail, repairs cost billions, and those billions come from taxpayers and higher water bills. When power grids collapse, electricity companies raise rates to recoup losses, pushing utility bills into crisis levels. The average American household is now paying 22% more for utilities than in 2019, with some states seeing increases closer to 35 to 40%. And none of this is optional. You can cut groceries, you can delay purchases, but you cannot opt out of water, electricity, sewage, or transportation systems. So, as America's foundational systems crumble, the cost of simply existing rises for everyone, with no path back down. This is what economists call a structural affordability trap. And it's why life in the United States feels like it's getting harder every single year. Because it is. When a nation can't maintain the systems that sustain daily life, those costs fall directly onto the population. And that burden, heavy, invisible, and unavoidable, is crushing Americans at scale. At the very top of this entire crisis, above housing, above wages, above healthcare, above groceries, lies something deeper, something far more dangerous, something that economists can't measure, but every American feels in their bones: the collapse of the American social contract itself. The belief that if you work hard, if you play by the rules, if you invest in your education, if you put in the effort, you will be able to build a stable life. That belief has evaporated. And when a society loses that shared promise, affordability doesn't just decline, it ceases to exist because the system stops functioning as a ladder and starts functioning as a wall. Right now, 71% of Americans believe the economy is rigged against them, according to a 2024 Pew Research survey. 3 out of 4 millennials say they will never achieve the financial stability their parents had. And Gen Z reports the lowest economic optimism in recorded American history. Trust in government is at 19%, trust in media is at 12%, and trust in corporate institutions is collapsing to single digits. This is what happens in late-stage empires. The public stops believing in the fairness of the economic game, and that disbelief becomes the final stage of decline. Because once people disconnect from the social contract, everything downstream breaks. Fewer people start businesses, fewer people invest, fewer people form families, fewer people buy homes, fewer workers feel loyalty to their employers, fewer citizens feel loyalty to their government, and the entire system becomes a collection of individuals trying to survive instead of a nation trying to thrive. The economy no longer flows, it fractures, and those fractures amplify every crisis beneath it. Housing becomes impossible because no one believes policymakers will fix it. Healthcare becomes predatory because trust has eroded. Food becomes overpriced because corporations know the population feels too powerless to fight back. The affordability crisis is not just economic, it is philosophical, it is psychological. It is the recognition by millions that the old rules no longer apply, and the new rules are written by forces far above their control. When a society reaches this stage, affordability can't be restored by stimulus checks, interest rate cuts, or temporary caps on prices. The only way affordability returns is when the average citizen once again believes the system works for them, not against them. And right now, America is nowhere close to that belief. The affordability crisis is the symptom. The collapse of the social contract is the cause. Listen, if there's one thing I want you to take away from this video, it's this. You are not crazy, you are not lazy, and you are not failing. The system is failing you. And the sooner we start acknowledging that out loud, the sooner we can prepare for what's coming next, because the truth is, this isn't a temporary dip or a rough year or just inflation. This is the beginning of a massive economic transition that will reshape every part of American life, from what you eat, to where you live, to how you work, to whether the next generation will have a future that's even recognizable. But I'm going to tell you something that nobody in the news will say. You can still prepare, you can still adapt, and you can still protect yourself, but only if you stop waiting for the people in power to fix this. They won't. They can't. We're already too far in. That means you are your own first line of defense now. Whether that means cutting expenses, building emergency savings, getting out of debt, stocking essentials, upskilling, or finding a community that actually supports you, do something. Even one step forward is better than standing still in a collapsing system. I want to hear from you in the comments. What part of this hit you the hardest? What are you seeing in your city, in your job, in your daily life? Your stories matter. They help people realize they're not alone in this. And trust me, millions of people are feeling exactly what you're feeling right now. If you got value from this, make sure to like the video, drop a comment, and subscribe so this message actually reaches more people who need to hear it. And join me on the next one, because we're going deeper into what's really happening behind the scenes, why the system is breaking down so fast, and what ordinary Americans can do to stay one step ahead. Until then, take care of yourself, take care of the people you love, and don't lose hope. We're going to get through this together.